Once you have the hood up, you're going to come right over here to this engine cover and lift it up. Get this out of the way. We have a clear view of our intake. We need to get this out of the way. Next, we're going to take this off. We're going to remove the clamp right here. And then the one over on the other side. Let's get this right off of here. Remove this wiring. Set that to the side. Next, grab this tube. Lift it up off of there. Check to make sure it's not damaged. Get that off of there and set it aside. Spray the bottom area of your EGR tube. Now that that's sprayed, let's go ahead and remove these two bolts with our 8mm. Nice. Go ahead and grab that tube, pull it right out. Nasty. So next you're just going to take a vacuum or whatever you've got and make sure you get all the crud out of here, because once we lift this up, last thing you want is anything getting inside this engine. Now that we have that as cleaned up as possible, we're going to move right along to these fuel injectors. Lift up on this red piece right here, that's the lock, and then squeeze in on there. Check your connector. Do the same to all 8. If for some reason your connector doesn't want to come up, I just take a small pocket screwdriver, come right along here. I'm going to give this a little tap. Pops up, give it a twist. Nice. And then you can pull this right off, theoretically. Okay, now that we have all the fuel injector wires off of here, we're going to continue on to this gas line. There may still be pressure, so watch your eyes. Use the tool that looks like this. Slide it in under here. There we go. Comes right off. Now, continuing with our small pocket screwdriver, you're going to take out this little red lock. Sometimes they shoot out, so just be careful. I'm going to go right under here. Lift up on that little latch. If you look right behind the intake, you're going to see where the wiring goes with a little pushy-do. Get that out of there. There we go, that broke off nice. Now if you feel along the back side of the intake, near the firewall of the vehicle, you're going to find a hose that goes into it. Remove that from the intake. So if you're having an issue getting the hose off the back side of the intake, and if you're like me, you don't want to break this intake because it's only plastic, I would just follow that hose. It's a vacuum hose, and it comes right over here to the brake booster. Right here is where I'm going to take the hose off, and that's going to make sure that the intake will remain safe. Alright, so now that we've got that disconnected and we're doubly sure that we clean this as clean as possible. Like I said before, you don't want any gunk getting inside this engine once we lift the intake. We're going to move along to removing these 4 bolts. There's one here, and they go right down along the line. One thing that I want you to remember is there is going to be one hidden on one side over here, and then on the passenger, well, on the driver's side, there's going to be another one hidden more towards the front. Let's get those out of here. They're captured bolts, so they're just going to stay right inside the intake. Go ahead and grab this hose and pull it off the intake. Once you have all your bolts loose and they can jiggle around just like this, you need to make sure that they can go up and down. If they don't go up and down, they probably still have a thread, and it's really going to make you mad. Go ahead and grab onto this, lift it straight up. Yeah, just like I said, with the one thread, that's what happens. My hidden bolt. Go ahead and grab onto this and lift it straight up and out. Now that we have this all open, you want to make sure you take a rag or whatever you've got that can cover these holes. You don't want anything falling into your engine. Next, we're going to carefully remove this. Now that I vacuumed this out, I'm just going to spray the entire area because I like to replace all of these at once. Disconnect these connectors. So next we're going to use our 10mm. Remove these bolts. Now to get these things out of here, even though we sprayed them down, they've been in there for about the length of the vehicle, I'd have to assume. So more than likely they're going to be frozen. I would use something like this and just try to get under the lip and see if you can pry it up. Problem with that is, well, boo. Well, if you have this problem, I'll show you how to fix it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pop this up. Get that out of here. Grab this. Should just pop right out of there. Set that aside. So what I'm going to use for this is one of these taps, and it's a 10 by 1.5. You can use pretty much whatever you want, but what I figured is it pretty much fits inside that hole on its own. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to screw this in so I have some pretty good threadage inside of the broken unit itself. Go ahead and hit that area one more time with some penetrant. Grab a screwdriver, a chisel, whatever you've got, and a hammer. And we're just going to go right on the plastic area of it, right along the metal part of the engine. Just give it a couple bonks. We want to try to break this free. Okay, it's starting to turn. If you feel like, grab some of these long nose locking pliers. Let's see if we can lock those in. Now I'm going to try to pry upward and see if I can pull this up. Nice. It's important to make sure you pay attention inside these holes just to see if any debris came off of the old solenoids. Okay, so next it's important to make sure you clean out these holes. Just use a rag. Just get right around in there. Once again, just double check to make sure that there's nothing inside of any of those holes. None of the gaskets from the old solenoids came off, no debris or anything like that. Get those holes as clean as possible and let's move along. So we have our new solenoid here. You just want to make sure that you put a nice coating of oil along all those O-rings. Like to use a little fresh oil, of course. More the merrier. It likes it that way. Okay. And line them up with your hole. And slide it down and in. In case these don't want to go down for you after you've lubricated them, I don't want you to get nervous. Just take your pry bar and go right along this mounted area right there, okay? And then just bonk it down until it reaches the engine. Do not hit up along the top. You don't want to risk damaging any of this. Put in and bottom out all these bolts, and then we'll torque them to 11 Newton meters. Make sure you lock them in. So next we're going to take a nice razor blade. Be careful, because obviously it's sharp. We're just going to go right along these edges just like this. And that's just where the gasket's going to ride. That's going to be in between the engine and the intake. Once you have those as scraped down as possible, go ahead and hit them with some parts cleaner. Let's make sure we get this back in here. so we made our way over to the workbench, and I want you to pay special attention to this area right here. This is the opening area on the fuel rail where that line went on. Just make sure nothing comes out, and especially make sure nothing gets in your mouth or eyes. Once you can see the back side of this, you're going to remove this gasket just like this. Do the same to all the rest. Now we have those other gaskets out. Let's grab these. It's hard as a rock. It's nice. Dang. Okay, let's get ready for an install. Make sure you clean down your intake along where these gaskets are going to ride. You don't want anything sticking up that's going to cause this to not sit flush. So now that we have all the gaskets out of here, it's important to remember to clean up the inside areas of here. I like to use something as simple as this. It's a nice plastic bristled brush, okay? You can call it an acid brush. Use a little bit of throttle body cleaner, and you can go right inside here. You don't want to spray very much though. Be very sparing with it, okay? Just enough to get it wet, and then just take your brush, scrub, 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 pour it over a little bucket, use a rag, clean it out, okay? Once you do all these chambers all the way around and you have them as clean as can be, you can move along. If you look right around the outer portion of the intake port right here, you're going to see a little metal piece with a couple little holes in it. That's your fuel injector. Comes right through, okay? If you notice any of those holes are clogged, you can either try to clean it or you'd want to replace it. So I'm just going to take my rag and put it right inside this porthole like that. That's going to absorb any extra moisture. Give that a little spritz. Make sure you hold on to it so it can't fall into there. Clean this up. Ooh, there's lots of crud coming off of there. Nasty. Make sure you get that fuel injector hole. Grab a clean part of the rag. Clean that up. That's beautiful. Do the same down the line. That looks great. Now with everything all cleaned up, let's start installing. You can start with whichever little piece you want. Get all these gaskets in there. You got the rounded edge. Make sure you set it with the rounded edge on the intake itself. Do the same down the line and of course on the other side. Beautiful. Okay, start grabbing these out of here. Paying special attention to make sure nothing falls inside of the engine, once again. Wipe down the area where the gaskets are going to ride. They need to be 100% clean. If you have any issues along here that could hold that gasket up, you're going to have a vacuum leak and major running issues. Okay, it's time to get the intake installed. And bring it in, bring it straight over the top of everything, and set it down nice and level. Make sure all your bolts are lined up and start them all in before you start tightening any of them. Okay, so we have all these started in, and I'm just going to use something very light like this because I don't want to tighten them up too much to the point they're over tightened, obviously. When you start snugging these down, as you bottom them out, you're going to start from the center bolts. Okay, come over here now, do the same thing. Okay, so now that we have all of our bolts started in, we didn't bottom any of them out yet. When we do go to bottom them out, we're going to use something that has very light torque. We don't want to torque these down too much. It's very important that they're specifically torqued. As we go, we're going to start with the center bolts. I'm just going to bottom that out. I'm going to come over to this side, do the same thing on this one. All right, now I'm going to go crisscross, and I'm going to come this way to the next bolt. Over here, same thing. All right, now we're going to go up over this way. this one. Come up to the front. See if I can get all the way in the back. Last one. Okay, let's torque these to manufacturer specifications. Okay, let's torque these to 12 Newton meters in the same crisscross pattern we did before. Torqued. Make sure you check and reconnect in your fuel injectors. Push it, lock it in. Do the same to all 8. Grab your fuel line, reconnect it to the fuel rail. Give it a tug. Doing all right. All right, so let's get our vacuum hose reconnected to the booster. Very important. Nice. Reconnect in the breather hose. Make sure you get that electrical connector on the back side of the intake reconnected. And then, of course, lock it in. Next, it's time to reinstall the EGR tube. But before you do that, you need to make sure you get off any remnants of the old gasket. You need to replace the EGR gasket. That's very important. You can use your small pocket screwdriver. Just come right along the edge and pull off the majority. Make sure you recycle that. All right, so we've got our EGR tube here. You have this rubber gasket. Make sure that that's still in good working condition and it's not dry or brittle or cracked. Once you're sure of it, just take a little bit of nice clean oil and just go right along that edge. Just a teeny bit of oil. You don't need very much at all, okay? And this is just to help it get inside here. You can put a little bit in there if you're worried about it. Okay. We're gonna bring this in. Slide it right in like that. And then this should line up right down along the bottom where the EGR tube is. It's going to be right over there. Okay. Gasket, bolts. Start them both in before you tighten either of them down. Let's go ahead and bottom out these bolts, but don't make them too tight because we're going to torque them to 15 Newton meters. Torqued. Make sure you have the wiring re-secured to the back of the intake. All right, let's make sure we have this reconnected. I'm going to put it right on the front. And then it just sits right along these clips. Careful pushing it on because the plastic does get brittle. Let's get this connected back on here. Make sure you lock it in. Let's get the intake hose back on here. Snug up your clamps. You can use a flathead or an 8mm. Make sure they're tight. Move along to your electrical. Lock it in. Let's go ahead and get the engine cover on there. Okay, if you're going to be running your vehicle inside of an enclosed area, make sure it's well ventilated. Let's spark it up. We're going to see a lot of smoke come out from any chemicals that are inside of that intake. Make sure you check your dash for any check engine light. Once you have the vehicle running, it's important to get back under the hood and just take a look at that engine. Make sure it's not shaking around like crazy rodeo style. If you see something like that, more than likely you have a vacuum leak, or maybe you left a fuel injector disconnected. Double check it. If it's running smooth, you're doing all right. Okay, so now it's important to make sure that you discharge your capacitors. To do that, and I know this isn't the battery that's in the charger, we used a separate vehicle because it's easier to see. All you would do is you disconnect the terminals from the battery. I always start with my negative, remove it. Positive, remove that as well. At this point, what you would do is you would connect these two together and then wait approximately 1 minute. Just hold them, give them a little rub so that way there you know you're making good contact, and then just hold them. 1 minute. All right, that's been a minute. We're going to connect the positive first. Tighten that right up so it can't move. Grab your negative, connect that as well. Nice and tight, nice and tight.